This video is the last video on a series I did, which is a full kitchen build, and this video is going to cover the upper cabinets. Now in this kitchen there were only 3 cabinets, but one was a corner cabinet, one was a skinny cabinet, and then one was a double-doored cabinet. So even though it's only 3 cabinets, it kind of covers the gamut of what anyone would build. If you're interested in how to make base cabinets, fridge cabinets, or an island, that's all on a playlist in my channel for one kitchen. It's a full build. So how I start all these projects is I rip down my material and then I'm going to cross cut it to length. All of these kitchen cabinets, the uppers, are going to have identical sides. So for the corner cabinet, the small cabinet, and the double cabinet, I'm going to make 6 sides, 2 per cabinet, and like I said, they're all the same. My joinery of choice are rabbits and dados, so I'm going to skip ahead to show you the finished cabinet so it makes a little bit more sense when I make all the cuts. I do an integrated spline on the front, I do dado cuts for the bottom and the top, I do a fixed middle shelf, and then I also do a rabbit for the backer. So because these cabinets are skinnier than the base cabinets, I could do all of my dado cuts on the radial arm saw, which is a safer way to do it than sending it over the table saw on these long pieces. So that's all I did. I set up stops so I could cut all of my dados at the same locations on all 6 panels. You saw the top and the bottom. I cheated in about 1 inch up just so that there's a little bit of space on the bottom if you want to hang lighting or hide some wires. And then on long runs, I always like to do at least 1 fixed shelf. Once I have my sides done, I could kind of roughly calculate my spacing for all of my partitions. The shelf and the top and the bottom are going to be the same. So if you've been following along for the whole series, the upper cabinets are going to be similar in the sense to the base cabinets in that they're fixed sizes. I'm doing the integrated spline, but these are only 12 inches deep, so my side panels are 11 and 5/8, and then the width is just going to be decided by the shelves, the base, and the top, which I interchangeably will call shelves as well. And the only big difference is these are not getting a toe kick. The face frame on these is going to be the same sizing as the base cabinets. So once I had my pieces all cut out, and the reason I cut the shelves at the same time, rough length and rough width, is so that I could put the integrated spline on all of my pieces at the same time. So at this point I paired these up into 2 because the backer and the on these has to be mirrored. It's not going to be on the same side for all of my panels. So you can see one of these I'm going to send through technically with the bottom facing first, because that middle shelf, even though I calculated it pretty well, it's about 1/16 of an inch off from being in the middle. So technically if I send all these through the same way, that shelf will be off by about 1/16 of an inch. So by pairing them together and sending through one with the base first and then one with the top first, it will give those panels the mirrored effect. For the integrated spline, I'm going to test cut it because it's a little bit easier to see. It's just a little tongue that goes on the front. It's integrated into the cabinet, so I don't have to have any sort of floating material, and that's just ripped on both sides. You can see with the sacrificial fence, I do that at the same time as the shelves and the backer, so all of them are cut at the same time. It's just a 3/8 inch spline by about 1/4 inch thick. So then at this point I could calculate my cabinets. This is 3/4 inch ply, but it's not a true 3/4, but I go about 3/8 of an inch into it. So I could take my final width and subtract 3/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch on either side, and get my measurements. Now you'll see there's 2 separate measurements, and that's because on the bottom I'm going from the backer all the way to the front of the cabinet, but for my middle partitions, because these doors on here are insets, it's not going to go all the way to the front, and in fact I usually have it shy of the front by about 1/16 of an inch so that I don't have to worry about the doors hitting it. So once I had those measurements, like I said, I rough cut all these panels so I could put that integrated spline on it at the same time. And you saw the cut list, I could cut all of these down. The one big difference is going to be in the corner cabinet, and that is because that piece is going to be cut like an L. So I'm basically, that corner cabinet, I changed my dimensions a little bit from the drawing and made it perfectly square, and made the side cabinet a little bit smaller just so the math was easier. But I'm just going to basically cut, it was about a 20-inch square, and then once I have those, I could cut the little L out of it. So once I had all my pieces, I can now cut them down to size on the radial arm saw. That will give you a little bit of tear out in the pieces, but the tear out is hidden inside those dados, so that's why I use that. And then I can start dry fitting these pieces together. So you can see the integrated spline is around the whole perimeter front. Anywhere there's going to be a face frame is that. The middle shelf, like I said, is set back about 1/16 of an inch. It's not going to come all the way to the front. You can see the bottom comes all the way to the front. It also has that spline, and it's coming up from there's that little spacer on the bottom, and then you can see the backer. All of the shelves meet perfectly across that back. So with a dry fit, I could take measurements and cut my backer. This is a 1/2 inch backer. This is all pre-finished ply, so I don't have to worry about the inside of the cabinets. And then this was a little too wide. This cabinet is almost about 36 inches, so I just use a circular saw to cut it down, and that is the backer. Now obviously hanging cabinets, I'm always going to use a thick backer, but I like to put that on my material anyway, because you could see the backer, until you attach that backer, that piece kind of want to act like a fluctuating parallelogram back and forth, and that backer will help you square everything up. So then to finish the corner cabinet, I need to cut out this little triangle in the front. To do that, I didn't worry about math. I just mocked it up in my sides, marked where it needs to come to the front, and then I'm going to cut this out on the table saw. While this upper cabinet, which is going to have bifold doors, was easier to do than the bottom Lazy Susan, which had a fixed door, it's still really important that everything on that front frame is square, so that when these two planes meet in the corner, especially with inset doors, if everything's not perfect, it's going to show in how the doors set in that frame. So you can see I just am using my fence to set everything up and track those marks, and then it's going to fit in my cabinet sides. Now this one I obviously cannot put that spline on the same way I did with the other pieces because it's an L. So what I'm going to do is just use a rabbiting bit. I could line it up with the integrated spline I already have on my pieces, so I know it's all going to be the same. This bit comes with varying sizes bearings, so you can make the depth different, and I could just add that in there. Now you saw there's curved cuts from the table saw, which is fine because I could cover those up pretty easily, cheat them to the top and the bottom. This is paint grade on the outside, so you won't really see them. And then that's how I did the spline. And then gluing up the corner cabinet is the hardest, so I'm going to show that one. I basically just attach all of my fixed shelves at one point. I make sure that spline in the front is all the same, and I'll tack everything in place with some brads. Then I can kind of flip this over and do the exact same thing on the other side. Add some glue, add some brads, and kind of get all of those pieces so they're not really moving anymore on me. And then I could go about and putting the backer on there. This backer's not to size because you'll see I'm going to add a 45 on the back, so I just rough cut these. Obviously they fit top to bottom, but they don't necessarily meet perfectly in the back. And then the backer, like I said, adding screws and brads to all that, trying to square it up as best as possible because it's kind of hard to square up these corner cabinets the way I usually do it. So I am using a square in the back to get those shelves as square as possible before all that glue sets up. And then obviously I'm going to go back through and sink screws into these. Now there's three exposed sides on all of these cabinets, so I didn't put screws on the exposed sides, just brads. So I have some clamps on this one holding everything in place. And then that is what that corner cabinet looks like. I could kind of pull some diagonals off the front to check for square. That's kind of the best I can do on these corner cabinets, and as long as they match up, I know I'm good to go. For my face frames, I'm making them all out of poplar. That's my wood of choice for paint grade projects. The stiles and the rails are going to match the base cabinets. That's what the customer wanted. So most of those are going to be 2 inches, and then the bottom piece will be 1 3/4 inches. So I just rip a bunch of that material. With that integrated spline, I can just bring my material up to the piece, mark where that groove has to be. That groove is a perfect 1/4 inch, so I could put a 1/4 inch dado stack in my saw, set the fence to mark up with my pencil marks, and then I can just rip all of these pieces and then add them on there. So because these are so thick, a lot of these cabinets, that face frame is going to overhang the cabinet, so I'll use special hinges for that. To attach these in place, I'm going to have to remove some of the spline on the bottom, so I just use a saw to do that, and then everything kind of pops into place. And the nice thing about this is it's such a nice fit that some parts I'll leave loose and adjust them for the install. But the panels on wherever that you're going to see the sides of the cabinet, it's flush on the outside, and that's why you get an overhang on the inside of the cabinet. And you can see all of my middle shelves are cheated back so they don't hit. For where the 2 cabinets join, I do a double spline, and this one I'll keep detached and I'll attach on site. Now I've been working in this kitchen, so I know the walls are not square, so I put a pretty hefty 45 on the back corner of the corner cabinet because it would not meet in the walls very well if I didn't. So this will kind of remove any sort of out of squareness issues with that back side of the wall, and I'll patch that. You'll see a little later in the video. I put edge banding on all of the shelves, and all of the movable shelves will also get edge banding, and that is what my shelves look like with the face frame. For the top, same process. This top is also 2 inches. I could just line it up with where I need it to be, and the top is the same for all of them, so I could set that blade in the fence and just go through and rip a bunch of material with that same groove, kind of mock it up on my piece, mark where it needs to be cut it, and then just pop it in place. So these hold on there without any hardware, which is nice, so I can kind of build as I go and then permanently attach the pieces I need to when that time comes. And then the bottom, like I said, is 1 3/4 inches, so that is what I do on the bottom, and it's flush, so you could see it overhangs down a little bit. And then that is also what that one looks like. And there's all the cabinets with the face frames ready to go. You can see that cut now in the corner cabinet as well, what that looks like. I left all the stiles long on this one and then eventually cut them down. And then for the corner cabinet where they meet, I just did regular butt joints because once it's painted, you can't really tell. And then for this one, I ended up gluing pretty much all the stiles in place. Because they have such a severe overhang, the hinges are going to attach the face frame, and I wanted to make sure they were sturdy so that when I put the doors on, they're where they're going to be. If the face frame was coming on and off, it could kind of throw off my measurements. So just put glue in there and some brads, and that is how everything is held in place. For the doors, I went and got my rough opening. I make my doors basically to fit right in the piece, and then I'll scribe them all to fit. So for the double doors, you see I'm just cutting them in half, and they're all the same height. Now on these doors, because the double doors on that bigger cabinet are so large, I decided to do bridle joints, which I'll show you how I make those versus how I usually make doors. And because I'm doing bridle joints on all of them, on the big doors, it made sense to just do it on all of them. So right now I'm just putting a 1/4 inch groove perfectly in the middle of my piece. You could see I did a test cut, and then I could send all of my pieces through. I have a dado stack in there because I'm using MDF for the inserts, which is a perfect 1/4. But I have found that, especially with this lumber, because at this point I'm using some lumber I've had in the shop for a while, I will send it through in both directions. It just makes it a little more accurate. To cut the bridle joints, I'm basically doing a through tenon on my stiles, which is the vertical part of the door. So all I have to do is line that up with where the groove is that I put on there. I have my blade raised, and I just cut that through tenon with a tenoning jig. And then for the tenons that are going to go in there, I just set everything up on the radial arm saw. You're seeing me cut this, but I always do test cuts, make sure everything fits, and I'm just removing the top side of the material and leaving that the tongue in the middle. I'm going to do that on both sides, and then I could dry fit my doors. So the bridal joists take a little bit more time, but not a ton. So it's always a nice peace of mind to add those, because over time, the doors, especially when they're heavier, have a tendency to sag. And then I could calculate my inner perimeter, add my groove, which is usually about 3/4 of an inch, calculate that, and then cut all of my panels. The panel is going to slide into that space pretty snugly. I can add glue to all of my tongues. I don't really want to get glue on that panel because you want this to float, that panel to float in there. So I could add glue on all of my tongues and then slide that in place as well. And that is how I constructed these doors. The base cabinets, I made the doors the standard way, which is just basically smaller tongue and grooves. So if you want to know how I did that, you could check out one of the earlier videos in this series. I show how I did that. And then on this one, it's easier to check for square. I could check my diagonals on these bridal joints. They usually glue up pretty square. If it's not square, your shorter side, you basically kick your longer side to grab the two ends of the longer side, kind of shift it towards the shorter side until those measurements match. You can put some clamps on there and let these dry. As those were drying, I finished up some smaller tasks for the floating shelves. I just used some pegboard to drill all of my pinholes. It's a pretty easy way to do it. There's not a lot of holes to do, and I could transfer that pegboard onto the other side, and that's how I drill all the holes. I'm going to put 2 45s on some scrap piece of wood, and this is going to mount in the back side of the corner cabinet to cover that gap and kind of sure up the back side of that cabinet. And that is how I finished that off as well. You can see I made I didn't show making the shelves, but the shelves are obviously in place. I make them about a 1/16 inch smaller than the opening so they fit. And then for the corner shelves, I had to put pins in the back as well. Otherwise, the shelves wanted to kind of float down because there was nothing holding them up in the back. So I used that pegboard to also drill holes in the back as well as the side, which you will need to do if you're doing corner floating shelves that are in an L shape like that. They're just too heavy to only have pins on the side. And then I could go in and calculate where that angle is, because I already had my corner shelves cut, and rip that off the back and put that in place as well. And I edge band all of the sides of these. It was kind of a pain with the pre-finish apply, because usually you have to shave the ends of that veneer that goes on there, and the pre-finish ply isn't necessarily fragile, but it's harder to do because you're not really marring the surface. Sometimes I just use a sander to clean it up, and that wasn't really an option for this. And then that is how that shelf fits into place. So then these are my doors mocked up on a couple of them. So I've already done 2, and I'm going to show you how I do this third one for the double door. So like I said, I make these pretty much to fit in the opening. Some people like to measure the opening, subtract your reveal, and just make them to size. I like to spend the time to scribe my reveal. I find it's just more accurate, especially on these taller cabinets. These are almost 4 feet tall. Everything's just never perfectly square. Even if your carcass is square, sometimes the poplar's not perfect. It just makes for a perfect finish. So kind of pop it in place. I have an 1/8 inch piece of aluminum bar, and I'm just going to track the 1/8 inch piece down with my pencil mark, so that will give me an 1/8 inch mark around the 2 sides of my doors. I do 2 sides at a time, and then I can just cut to that line and it will be perfect. You can see my doors fitting in there pretty well, but there are some hairline gaps, so that stuff usually shows up, but this eliminates those difference in material. Now like I said, these were pretty square, so this time around I could just just cut most of this on the radial arm saw and on the table saw, and then kind of sheet up to the line in a couple spots. So you could see I got pretty much to the line. There was one spot where it wasn't perfect. I could just make it flush with a sander, and then same thing with the table saw. You could see it's pretty, these cabinets are pretty square, so my line's cutting almost perfectly. I can make a few adjustments with the fence and then just lightly sand that edge. So once I have the two sides cut, I could prop this in place with the spacers in place now, 1/8" spacers. And then for this one, I'm only going to do the reveal on the top. Once it's in place, I'll do the reveal for where the two doors meet. So now you can see I have a perfect 1/8" spacing around that whole door. And then, like I said, I'm going to do the exact same thing to the top now that it's propped in place. I'm going to obviously not film that. And then I can mount these. These are Blum Inset hinges, but they're made for face frames, that overhanging face frame. So the mounting plate is a little bit different, but it's pretty standard for Blum. The nice thing about Blum is all their stuff is interchangeable, so that you can see the face plate's a little bit heftier, a little different. It has a flange on the front that clips right onto the face frame. So the nice thing about the double doors especially is I could kind of prop this in place, creep my head inside the cabinet, mark where those mounting holes are because I have this shimmed up. That is what that looks like on the inside of the cabinet. I could add the screws for that face plate. You can see how it kind of fits in place right on top of that frame. There's a little flange on it so it can't go past the frame, and attach those, and then this cabinet door pops right into place. So I can make the adjustments on those, and then you can see they meet pretty much perfectly in the middle. So all I did was rip a heavy 1/16 off of both of them, and that is how I got the reveal in the middle. If they don't meet perfectly in the middle, what I would have done is taken my little piece of 1/8" metal and scribed that center as well. So that is the double door. Now for the bifold doors, I'd never done these before, so I ordered the Blum bifold door hinges, kind of learned as I went. So I have my two doors. You'll notice they're different sizes because on one side the double styles almost flush with the cabinet. On the other side it overhangs the cabinet a little bit. I knew that was going to be an issue and I thought it would bother me, but honestly, because it's a corner cabinet, once it's in the space, you really can't even tell. So I went and I did the reveal on those doors just like I did the other ones, so they fit in the space, and then I could start attaching the cup hinges. It's pretty much the same process, only the cup hinges on these ones are not drilled with the same, I have a jig for those. The math is a 1/2 inch closer off the frame, so all I did was follow the math on the instructions, and the face plate, it tells you exactly where to mount them. It's going to be a millimeter measurement. Luckily I have a millimeter tape, and then I can mount those as well, and this was pretty easy. The instructions were pretty straightforward. Everything snapped into place. There's 3-way adjustment on these hinges as well, so you could kind of get them where you needed them to be, but right off the bat it was working pretty well, and I could pop that back into my frame. And then you could see it was a pretty tight fit, which I had the same issue with the Lazy Susan once you put the hardware on. So I went through again and kind of tweaked my reveals until they fit in there perfectly. Now at this point was when I noticed on the instructions you needed special hinges to mount to the cabinet. I did not know that, so I didn't have them, but I needed to start painting these cabinets. So luckily I was assuming because Blum's face plates are interchangeable, I can just mount them with the hinges I have, start painting these, and once the hinges come, just swap them out. You can see with the wrong hinges, the door just will not open all of the way, but that is how I kind of got it to work. I got everything to fit. I was happy with how that was looking. So to paint these, I put putty on pretty much everything when I'm painting, just so I don't have any weird holes. And on the sides that are exposed, I had to sand off the glossy finish on the pre-finished ply so the paint would stick to it. And then for the face frame and the side, I just used a roller because the sprayer, I didn't want to have to worry about masking off the whole inside of these cabinets. And actually, the roller turned out pretty well. And then for the doors, I used a sprayer. I've been using this for about a year. I've had no issues issues with it. It's a cheap sprayer. I believe the brand's HoneyBadger. I got it on Amazon after watching a couple review videos on YouTube, and have no issues with it. And once I prime it, I like to go through, the primer's going to raise the grain, so I'll go through and lightly sand everything with the sander on a low setting, and then this is finish coat. So it puts a pretty nice finish coat on there. There's the floating style that's going to get attached in the space, and you can see the face frames also with that finish coat as well. The hinges came in, so I could put the hinges back on all of the other doors, make sure everything fits. It's much easier to make these changes in my shop than at someone's house. These are the heavy-duty 170-degree hinges. So you can see they're quite bulky, but they're going to open all the way. And I was right, the face plate worked perfectly, and the cup hinge mounted exactly in there. It's a little bit different looking. It's all still has the three-way adjustments. And what I did was I marked where I had those, and I had to put a pretty hefty shim in there. It's a 1/2-inch shim and a 3/4-inch shim in order to bring it to the front of my cabinet. I couldn't find a mounting plate for this style hinge for inset hinges, so that's why that spacer's there. It's kind of bulky, but once you put the doors in the cabinet, you can't see it. So I could just pop those right in place, and I kind of learned that these doors are easier to mount one at a time, so I can mount this one into the cabinet. The marks from the old mounting plates worked perfectly, and then I could put this one in as well and pop it into the frame, and everything looked pretty good at this point, so I was happy with that. Like I said, the bifold doors were much easier than the fixed door. And then this is pretty much the finished product with everything hung. I do have some clips of install. I might upload that midweek just to kind of get it out of the way and start something new next week. But if you want to know how to make anything else in this video cabinet wise, I have uploaded those already on the channel.